Welcome to Sisters Inc., our podcast for and about women business owners, brought to you by Black Enterprise. I'm your host, Elisa Gums. Black women are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in America. And on every episode of Sisters Inc., we'll sit down with one successful CEO and share how she slays the challenges of being a Black woman in business. Today's episode is all about surviving the unthinkable. We're chatting with Arsha Jones, who founded Capital City LLC with her husband Charles in 2011 and has continued to grow the business and preserve their family legacy since his sudden death in 2019. Welcome to Sisters Inc., Arsha, and thanks so much for sitting down with us today.
No problem. I'm glad to be here.
Take us back to the beginning of Capital City. I know you have a long relationship with Mambo Sauce, but where did the idea for selling it come from?
That's a great question. The idea of selling Mumbo Sauce started in about towards the end of 2010, rolling over to 2011. I was pregnant with my fourth son, and I would constantly have cravings for wings and mumbo sauce. But by now, my husband and I had moved further out into the suburbs, and we could just no longer get access to this product anymore. And so it was kind of his job to drive me to the carryout to get wings and mumbo sauce. And then, of course, that became tiring. And so I decided that I would learn how to make it at my house so I wouldn't have to leave out and get it anymore. And that's where it started from. There was never any idea about making it a business. It was really just for me to enjoy in my home with my family and my other three boys.
And what was it like starting a business? Because we hear so many stories of people who go from making something literally in their kitchen, and then it's a whole nother world to make something for public consumption, to bottle it, to sell it. What was your startup journey like?
Sure, sure. I think that my startup journey I would say it was very unserious. I had previously had a background in website design, kind of business consulting, e-com, graphic design. So I had a really solid foundation of how to get started. And so I think that my thought process was, how hard could it be? Not really realizing just how hard it could be. And so, yes, as a foundation, I was able to use some of the skills that I had in social media and marketing and design to get me going. But there was a lot of uphill battles that I had to endure in order for us to go from a kitchen made product to now a retail shelf product.
You had a background, as you said, in social media, marketing, design. Your husband had a background in logistics.
Mhm.
When you started the business, did the two of you sit down and talk about who would handle what?
No, actually, it really was. I did everything. And because the operation was just so small, we would get, starting out, we would get a handful of orders every week, and it was 100% manageable by just one person. And I don't think that it became a conversation until it was unmanageable. And I really needed to have him full time in the business shipping out orders because at the time, I was still working at like a regular 9 to 5 job. And so I didn't have the capacity to now work this full time job, come home and make the product, and then still ship it out and be able to manage customers, customer service, procurement, ordering supplies, and things like that. That's when it became a conversation.
Yeah. And once, he came in full time, did you then develop specialized roles like this is your area, this is my area?
Yeah, we did. He largely handled operations, and I kind of did everything else, which allowed us to really create separate paths that didn't overlap unless they needed to. And so that allowed us to then fully focus on that specific area of interest. And, you know, being married complicates things as it is in running a business. So I think having very specialized, defined roles that were separate from each other allow us to not kind of cross hairs and cross paths and have conflict within the business.
So most couples don't have the conversation about, what will happen. Um, Being married and on top of that, running a business together, you sort of have to have two different
Yeah,
conversations
yeah,
about what will happen. Did the two of you ever talk about the possibility that something might happen to one of you? Did you have anything in place?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So yes, yes, we had conversations about what would happen if anything happened to either one of us, and I guess my thought process wasn't so much of what would happen to him. I mean, if something happened to him, what would I do? Because I largely ran the business. And so I was comfortable knowing that I could still manage it without him. I think my biggest concern was if something happened to me, because I knew that I was kind of the driver and the leading voice behind it all. And I was had things in place so that he wouldn't be alone in case something happened to me. And so, but yeah, we did have plans in place because I knew that this was a company that he couldn't run by himself. He couldn't run it by himself. And not, disparaging him because he did really well in operations. But man, it is a lot of things you have to be able to manage and a lot of different hats you have to wear to run a small business. At any day, at any point in time, I am on marketing, I am HR, I am on finance, I am on sales, I am support, I am, and so
You are everything.
yeah.
If there's a fill in the blank to come at the end, you are it.
And so it puts you in a position where you just have to wear a lot of hats and you have to switch those hats at any point in time. And you just really have to be a very specific kind of person to be able to pivot in that manner.
I think it's such a beautiful and selfless sentiment, what you just said. You were like, I was really thinking about if something happened to me, what would he do? What position would he be in? And, as life would have it with the curveballs that you're thrown, it's something happened to him
Mhm.
instead.
Yeah.
And I know you can never be emotionally prepared for that.
Mhm.
So, in the immediate aftermath, when you probably wanted to be thinking about anything but the business, how did you manage the company while you were still grieving?
I think it's because one of the things that helped me get through was just a promise that we kind of had always made to ourselves. And it was me and my husband had decided that no matter what was going on, no matter how we felt about each other or what was going on in our personal life, that we would always put the business first. And I kept that in mind because number one, I had to keep going. Number two, I had employees that were counting on me to show up. Like I don't have the ability to just not show up. And so knowing that, and it kept things in perspective. And the truth is, when you're dealing with grief, the feelings can be so overwhelming that sometimes you need a healthy distraction. You need the laughters and the oh gosh, you need to feel normal even if you don't some days. And I think that me having work to lean on allowed me to, even if in a moment, made me feel like things were back to normal.
Yeah. And you mentioned that, you had been running it by yourself at one point. So, of course, you knew everything to
Yeah.
do, but it's another matter altogether to make sure that, his role is filled after he's gone. Was that like a tough transition for you?
uh no, it was not a tough transition for me to then fill his role after his passing, simply because not too long before he passed away, we hired him an assistant. It was an operations assistant role who had been helping him kind of get things organized within the warehouse. And so I largely knew like Charles's job. And so the operations assistants knew more of the operations side. So essentially, we kind of just split Charles's duties. And I picked up what I could, and he picked up what he could until we could keep things going and figure out, okay, how do we move forward? And so that became a great way to kind of really for me to deep dive into the operations and figure out kind of how things were going and the direction that made sense and policies and processes that needed to be updated, software that we needed to kind of utilize better. And so it helped me kind of really get behind get behind the wheel and figure out, okay, this is where we are and this is where we go. Now, how do we create a path to get there?
Yeah, it sounds like you had some really good things in place. You had the conversation, you knew his role, you
Yeah.
had help. Having gone through this yourself, what would you say to other couples in business about making sure they're prepared for unforeseen tragedies?
Yeah. My advice for other couples would be to start the conversation. I know that many people don't even want to even like think about what would happen if when, set aside the business itself. I'm talking about these conversations aren't being had simply as a family unit. Like what happens to our kids in our home and everything else. And because we had this business that um, that conversation was just a larger conversation. So we had already planned on what would happen to the kids, where they would go if something happened to us or both of us. And so the business was wrapped into that, but it was just starting the conversation. I think it got to a point where the business was transitioning from this small business to something that like we had customers that would count that are using this product that would count on us and want to always have this product in their houses. And I was thinking about them, like this product would be missed if we weren't able to keep up with this the way that we are. And so that became a priority in making sure that that we had plans in place.
Yeah. For the last 5 years, you've been leading the company on your own. Can you tell us about some of the unexpected challenges you faced during that time and how you felt about navigating them without your husband and co-founder by your side? That's a big switch.
Yeah, that's a great question. How have I managed and what challenge as we had in the last 5 years? I would say, honest with you, so my husband passed away at the end of 2019, which means that by that spring, we were transitioning into the pandemic and COVID. And so that was a crazy time. I think that is the biggest thing that we had to deal with because there was just so much unknown about everything. The news was changing on a daily basis. The
Yeah.
supply chain was changing. Resources were less readily available. People were grabbing products off the shelf. So it was forcing us to move at a pace in which we hadn't before. And so I think that we were all we were all just holding on to our seats, just trying to trying to see this through the end. And I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges because it was something that was just so new. Wasn't just new to us. It was new to the entire world. I've never lived through anything like that, and it was a scary and wild time.
Yeah. And did you have to find like a new sounding board? How did you change your process to start figuring things out without him?
Yeah, honestly, I started to develop deeper relationships with my manufacturers, with the now operations manager to figure out, okay, how, where do we go from here? You know, and I think that a lot of my business sense doesn't necessarily come from books or I'm not college educated when it comes to business. I was a bachelor's of fine arts major, and so I paint and draw. And so I bring that up because it was really just based on having common sense conversations with the team of like, okay, what makes sense? Does this sound right? Does this look right? Does this operate in the way that we need it to? Are we reaching the end goal? Are customers getting their products? Are we able to service our manufacturers? So really it was sitting down and saying, okay, what makes sense? And then just doing that. That has actually gotten us really far in this journey is just sitting down and saying, okay, how can we make this work? We very much still consider ourselves outsiders in the food industry. We don't really operate like other small food businesses do. And for us, that has been our benefit.
Yeah, you've also experienced phenomenal growth during these past 5 years. Tell us how the company is doing now.
Yeah, the company is doing really well now. We added a few more employees. We just recently launched in Costco in the Washington D.C. metropolitan area, and that's going amazingly well. We just signed on with DC United, which is our Major League Soccer team here in the DC area, among our other partnerships that have all now been, we have created throughout the pandemic. So, partnerships with the Washington Nationals, Monumental Sports, and the Washington Wizards, the Baltimore Orioles. And so, wow, it's just been really great. We launched a pizza with And Pizza, which is a local pizza brand. During the pandemic, we also launched and did a short run with KFC, and we had a partnership with McDonald's. So it's really been a wild ride, but I am glad that people are accepting this product and wanting to try it and include it into their operations and really see value in not only what I created, but in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area.
Yeah, you have to be really proud of the job that you've done, not only of scaling the company, but really of honoring your husband's legacy by continuing to build this company that you started together. Would you say that anything has changed about your vision for the brand or how you approach the business because of what you've been through?
I has anything changed about how we approach business? Let's see. Hmm. I think if anything, what has grown in between how I do business is that all of the employees, they feel like family to me, you know, because one time it really was just me, Charles, and the four boys working in the warehouse. And so I think that that energy kind of create an atmosphere where now every new employee that comes in, they just automatically feel like
Yeah,
part of my
that's beautiful.
family. I know it's kind of cliche because people are always saying, business isn't family, but the truth is they really do feel like family. And I appreciate that because I've always wanted to create a welcoming and warm workspace where everyone feels like they're valued and that they can um, add to their workplace and that they feel like they are accomplishing things and moving forward and have a path, to now take care of their family. So that's really important to me, and I'm glad that that's we've been able to keep that feeling going here now. I don't know 20 employees down the line if it will still feel like that, but I'm hoping so.
You mentioned your four sons. Has their relationship to the business changed over the last 5 years?
Uh, their relationship to the business has changed simply because they're just not as here as often. They have now gone off to college and they are just, focused on kind of figuring out what they want to do. So they just aren't here as often as they used to be. Now, every now and then they'll come for the summers and work in the warehouse, but they can tell that the operation the operation is a lot different, and I tell them, I say, if you come in here to work, you don't work for me, you work for the warehouse team. You have to listen to them. Like, that's not because me, even as the owner, I can't go out there anymore and just, I don't know where things are and how they operate, so I just kind of stay out of the way, and so I like them to know, like, yes, this is still my company and I own it, but you work for them, not me.
Do you have any advice that you would give to other family businesses about preparing the next generation?
Yeah, I think the advice I'd give to other families in preparing the next generation is just getting them started. Letting them see behind the scenes. You don't have to wait for them to be older for them to participate. My kids, they were folding shirts in the warehouse. They were packing orders at events. They are handing out flyers and they're talking to customers and handing out samples. And it was always a fun time. That some of our best memories is when we were out in the heat together. And so I think that it not only gives them a work ethic that they can create a foundation for, but also some really great core memories.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Arsha, for sharing your small business success story, also your beautiful family story and your story of family business and family legacy. Everyone out there, please take a look at the company website, capitalcity.com. You can also follow them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Capital City Co. Check out the podcast channel on blackenterprise.com to find Sisters Inc. and other podcasts from Black Enterprise editors, writers, and experts. Be sure to subscribe to Sisters Inc. on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, or YouTube. And if you like what you hear, show us some love by leaving a 5-star review or put a sister on by spreading the word. This is Elisa Gums with Sisters Inc. for Black Enterprise. Thank you for listening.